Have you ever walked past someone in need and felt a pull to help? What if that single moment, that one small act of compassion, was the trigger for your entire life to change? Today's story is about a young woman, pregnant and haunted by grief, who shares what little she has with a stranger. She thought she was just being kind. She had no idea she was stepping into a world of secrets, danger, and a second chance at love she never thought possible. Prepare yourself for a story of incredible resilience, shocking twists, and the profound power of a single selfless act. Amelia was a survivor. Having grown up bouncing between foster homes, she learned early on that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. This fierce independence drove her to win a scholarship to a prestigious Chicago university, a world away from the instability she had always known. It was there she met Liam, the charismatic son of a real estate tycoon. He saw past her guarded exterior to the brilliant, kind woman within. Their love was a whirlwind, a beautiful rebellion against his wealthy, disapproving parents. They chose love over money, building a life in her tiny apartment. But a tragic car accident stole Liam from her, leaving Amelia utterly alone, shattered, and, as she would soon discover, pregnant with his child. Now grieving and facing an uncertain future, she works a menial cleaning job, her dreams of a degree and a happy life buried under a mountain of grief and responsibility. The morning air in the Chicago L station was a familiar cocktail of stale pretzels, damp concrete, and the faint metallic scent of the tracks. Amelia moved with the city's rhythm, a ghost in the river of commuters rushing to their lives. At 4 months pregnant, a deep exhaustion had settled into her bones, a weight heavier than the child she carried. Each morning was a battle against sleep and sorrow, but she always won, always made it to the train. At the base of the escalators, the usual group of homeless individuals held their ground. There was One-Eyed Jack, and a man they called the Professor, who muttered Shakespeare to himself. Amelia knew their faces, their stories, their silent struggles. She couldn't just walk by. Her own past, a patchwork of hunger and uncertainty, was a constant echo in her mind. So when she could, she'd buy them a hot coffee or a bagel. It wasn't much, but it was a shared piece of humanity in the city's cold heart. The flower vendors nearby would watch her, shaking their heads. "Look at that one," a woman named Rosa would say to her colleague. "Barely getting by herself, and with a baby on the way, yet she's feeding those bums. They'll just spend it on booze." They couldn't understand. They didn't know the gnawing emptiness of a stomach that hasn't eaten in a day, or the chill that seeps in when you have no home to go to. Amelia understood it viscerally. She knew that sometimes the warmth of a coffee cup in your hands is about more than just the liquid inside. It's a moment of dignity. It's the feeling that for one brief second, someone sees you not as a problem, but as a person. She knew many of them drank to numb the pain, the cold, the sheer hopelessness of their existence. She didn't judge them. She saw only the reflection of a life she had so narrowly escaped, and the loneliness she still felt every single day. But this morning, there was a new face among the familiar ones. He was young, maybe in his early 30s, hunched over a pair of worn-out crutches. A mass of tangled curly hair fell over his face, hiding his eyes. He didn't call out or ask for anything. He just stood there, a statue of quiet despair, with an old baseball cap on the ground in front of him. A wave of profound pity washed over Amelia. "My God," she thought, her hand instinctively going to her small belly. "And I complain about being tired." All her problems seemed to shrink in the face of his. The man had lost a leg, yet here he was, enduring. On impulse, she went to the cart vendor and bought a steaming coffee and a warm, glazed donut. She walked over and gently held them out to him. "Here," she said softly. "This is for you. I hope you have a better day." He looked up, startled, and she saw a flash of shockingly clear blue eyes. He was so flustered he could barely speak. "Thank you," he stammered, his gaze dropping back to the floor, a dark blush creeping up his neck. Not wanting to embarrass him further, Amelia gave a small wave and hurried on her way. But the image of his haunted blue eyes stayed with her, unlocking a door to a memory she kept tightly shut. She was 6 years old again, standing on the porch of her third foster home. It was cold and her thin jacket did little to keep out the biting wind. The other kids had parents who came for them on weekends, bringing toys and bags of candy. No one ever came for Amelia. She remembered a kind neighbour, Mrs. Gable, who would sometimes bring her a warm cookie, her eyes filled with a sad pity that Amelia both craved and hated. Mrs. Gable was the one who had made the call, the one who had seen the neglect and the bruises from her biological mother. She had saved her, but in doing so had sent her into the cold, impersonal machinery of the foster care system. A world where you learnt to be invisible, to expect nothing, to build walls so high no one could ever hurt you again. Those walls had served her well, even at the university. It was a different world, one of lavish trust funds and weekend trips to Europe. Her roommates Jessica and Tiffany were the queens of this world. They were beautiful, popular, and radiated an effortless confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. They treated Amelia with a kind of polite condescension, a mix of curiosity and disdain for the scholarship kid. They couldn't comprehend her relentless focus, the long hours she spent in the library while they were out at parties. They saw her discipline as weird, her quietness as arrogance. "Seriously, Amy, you need to live a little," Tiffany would say, tossing a designer handbag onto her perfectly made bed. "It's Friday night. All you do is study." Amelia would just smile and turn a page, but their words stung, reinforcing the feeling that she was an alien on their planet, forever looking in from the outside. Their passive-aggressive comments escalated when the midterm grades were posted. Amelia was at the top of the class. Jessica and Tiffany had barely passed. The jealousy that had been simmering beneath the surface now had a sharp, bitter edge. They saw her success not as a product of hard work, but as a personal affront. It was then they hatched their cruel plan, disguising it as an olive branch. "Amy, you have to come with us," Jessica had chirped one afternoon, her smile a little too bright. "My parents are having a huge party at our lake house in Michigan this weekend. Everyone's going to be there. It'll be so much fun. You've earned a break." Amelia was hesitant. It was so out of character for them. But a part of her, the lonely little girl who always wanted to be included, was desperate to believe it was a genuine invitation. Maybe this was her chance to finally fit in. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The lake house was a sprawling mansion of glass and cedar, a monument to old money. The party was in full swing, with 100 perfect-looking people drinking expensive cocktails and laughing a little too loudly. The air was thick with the scent of barbecue, lake water, and privilege. Amelia felt her walls go up instantly. This wasn't a friendly get-together. It was a social battlefield. Jessica and Tiffany descended on her, pressing a plastic cup into her hand. "You have to try this punch. It's my dad's secret recipe," they insisted. Amelia, who rarely drank, took a tentative sip of the sweet, fruity concoction. Over the next hour, they kept her cup full, chattering about meaningless gossip and fashion trends. Amelia just nodded along, feeling increasingly out of place and a strange fogginess settling over her mind. She felt dizzy, disconnected from her own body. Then it happened. She tried to stand up, but her legs felt like rubber. She stumbled, knocking over a table of appetizers before collapsing in a clumsy heap on the manicured lawn. The music seemed to stop. A circle formed around her, and then came the laughter, led by Jessica and Tiffany. "Oh my God, look!" Tiffany shrieked, pulling out her phone to record. "The quiet little bookworm is a total lightweight. I guess even saints have their vices." The humiliation was a physical blow, hot and sharp. Their fake friendship, the invitation, the punch, it was all a set-up. They had wanted to knock her off the pedestal they imagined she was on, to bring her down to their level. The faces in the crowd blurred into a single mocking jeer. She felt like that small, helpless child all over again, exposed and alone in a world that didn't want her. Just as a wave of despair was about to pull her under, a hand reached down to her. It was firm and warm. "Are you okay?" a voice asked, cutting through the laughter. She looked up and saw him. Liam. He wasn't laughing. His face was a mask of anger and concern. He helped her to her feet, his arm steadying her. He turned to Jessica and the crowd. "What is wrong with you people?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Grow up." The laughter died instantly. He ignored their sputtering excuses, gently guiding Amelia away from the party, away from the prying eyes and the cruel whispers. "Let's get you out of here," he said softly. "I'll take you home." In that moment, surrounded by a sea of casual cruelty, his simple act of kindness was a lifeline. He didn't see a clumsy drunken charity case. He saw someone who was hurting. The drive back to Chicago was mostly quiet. The alcohol and the humiliation had left Amelia drained and raw. Liam didn't press her for details. He just put on some soft music and let the silence be comfortable. As the city lights began to paint the horizon, she finally spoke. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to do that." He glanced over at her, his expression serious. "Yes, I did. I grew up with those people. They live in a bubble. They don't understand what it's like to have to fight for everything you have." He then confessed he'd noticed her in their economics class, impressed by her sharp questions and how she never backed down in an argument. For the first time, someone from his world was seeing her, truly seeing her, for her mind and her strength, not her background. By the time he pulled up to her dorm, a fragile, unexpected connection had formed between them. Their first real date was a week later. Amelia expected a fancy, expensive restaurant meant to impress her. Instead, Liam took her to a small, family-owned Italian place in Little Italy, followed by a walk along the lakefront. He wasn't like his friends. He was curious, attentive, and genuinely interested in her life, her dreams, her fears. He talked about the immense pressure from his father to take over the family business, a path he had no interest in. He wanted to be an architect, to build things that were beautiful and useful, not just profitable. She, in turn, slowly let her walls down, telling him about the foster care system and her dream of becoming an economist to help create fairer social policies. They were from different universes, but their core values aligned. They both wanted to build something real in a world that often felt fake. Their love story unfolded against the backdrop of the city. It was a montage of stolen moments and simple pleasures. They had late-night study sessions in the library that turned into whispered confessions. They explored different neighborhoods, eating cheap, delicious food from street vendors. He showed her his world of art galleries and architectural tours. She showed him her world of resilience and grit. For the first time in her life, Amelia felt completely safe. With Liam, she wasn't the foster kid or the scholarship student. She was just Amelia. And he wasn't just the real estate heir. He was the kind, funny, brilliant man who saw the best in her. Their love felt like a fortress, strong enough to withstand anything the world threw at them. They didn't know their first major battle was just around the corner. The inevitable dinner with Liam's parents was a masterclass in passive aggression. His mother, Valentina, and his father, Stephen, lived in a penthouse overlooking Millennium Park. The apartment was cold and minimalist, filled with art that was likely worth more than Amelia would ever earn. They asked her polite but pointed questions about her background, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. The subtext was clear. "You are not one of us. You are not good enough for our son." "It must be so difficult," Valentina said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "to come from your circumstances." Amelia held her head high, answering their questions with a quiet dignity that seemed to infuriate them even more. Liam squeezed her hand under the table, his jaw tight with anger at his parents' thinly veiled snobbery. The evening ended in an explosion. After Amelia had politely excused herself, Stephen confronted his son. "What do you think you're doing, Liam? This girl has no family, no name, no money. She's a gold digger. It's as plain as day." Liam's voice was shaking with rage. "Her name is Amelia, and she's worth more than all of you put together. I love her. That should be all that matters." His father laughed, a harsh, humourless sound. "Love doesn't pay the bills. I'm giving you an ultimatum. It's her, or your trust fund, your car, your place in this family and this company. You choose." Liam didn't even hesitate. He looked his father dead in the eye. Then I guess I choose her, he said. He walked out of that cold, sterile apartment without a backward glance, leaving behind a life of privilege for a future with the woman he loved. They made a home in Amelia's tiny, cramped studio apartment. It was a drastic change for Liam, who was used to luxury and space, but he never once complained. He sold his expensive watch for rent money and took a job driving for a rideshare service, working long, grueling hours. Their life was hard, a constant struggle to make ends meet, but it was filled with a joy and authenticity Liam had never known. They would cook simple meals together, their laughter echoing in the small kitchen. They would fall asleep on a lumpy mattress, tangled in each other's arms. They were poor in everything but love. Amelia had never been happier. She had a partner, a family, someone who had chosen her above all else. She finally had a home, not in a place, but in a person. It was a fragile, perfect happiness she prayed would last forever. That fateful morning, the air was thick with the promise of rain. Liam had been working a double shift to save up for a proper ring. Amelia was planning a special dinner, his favourite, a rich beef stew that filled the apartment with a warm, comforting aroma. She kept checking the clock, a small knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. He was late. She told herself he probably got a last-minute airport fare, a long ride that would mean a good tip. She texted him, "Hurry home, I'm making your favourite." No reply. The hours ticked by. The stew grew cold on the stove. The knot of anxiety grew into a cold, heavy stone of dread. Every siren she heard in the distance made her heart leap into her throat. She called his phone again and again, each time getting sent straight to voicemail. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The phone call came just after midnight. A calm, professional voice on the other end, a police officer from a precinct she didn't recognise. There had been an accident on the expressway. A drunk driver had crossed the median. Liam was gone. The words didn't make sense. They were just sounds, disconnected from reality. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. The world tilted on its axis, and everything went silent, then black. Grief was not a wave of sadness. It was a physical void, a black hole that opened up inside her and consumed everything. The light, the air, the future. The life they had built together, their fortress of love, had been demolished in an instant. She was alone again. But this was a loneliness so profound, it made her entire past seem like a trivial inconvenience. The funeral was a surreal nightmare. Liam's parents had taken over, arranging a lavish service for their society friends. Amelia felt like an intruder, an unwelcome ghost at the feast of sorrow. Valentina, her face a mask of rage and grief, cornered her near the chapel entrance. "This is all your fault," she hissed, her voice low and venomous so others wouldn't hear. "If he hadn't left his life for you, he wouldn't have been driving that cheap car at all hours of the night. You killed my son!" The words were a slap, but Amelia was too numb to feel them. She just stood there, a hollow shell, as the woman who should have been her mother-in-law walked away, leaving her to drown in a sea of blame and unimaginable pain. She was completely and utterly shattered. Weeks turned into a blurry, grey fog. Amelia moved through her days on autopilot, the world muted and distant. She stopped going to classes, barely ate. It was the persistent morning sickness that finally broke through the haze. At first, she dismissed it as a symptom of stress and grief. But it didn't go away. With a shaking hand, she took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of her lonely apartment. She watched as 2 pink lines slowly appeared, stark and undeniable. A maelstrom of emotions crashed over her. Joy, fierce and bright, that a piece of Liam was still with her. And then a tidal wave of terror. How could she do this alone? How could she bring a child into a world without a father, without any support? This baby was a miracle, a tiny flicker of light in the suffocating darkness, but it was also a terrifying, overwhelming responsibility. Clinging to a desperate sliver of hope, Amelia decided to tell Liam's parents. Maybe the news of a grandchild, their son's legacy, would bridge the chasm between them. She found them in their cold penthouse, looking older and more broken than she had ever seen them. She told them everything, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant. It's Liam's baby. You're going to be grandparents." For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something in Valentina's eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by bitterness. "Do you really expect us to believe that?" Stephen said, his voice cold as ice. "How convenient for you. You come here with this story, looking for a handout. You will not use our son's death to trap us. Get out. We don't want to see you or your child ever again." The finality in his voice was absolute. The last door had been slammed in her face. Her grief and anger curdled into a dark, desperate resolve. They don't want this baby. Fine. Maybe I can't do this either, she thought, the idea a poisonous whisper in her mind. She made an appointment at a women's health clinic, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. Sitting in the sterile waiting room, she felt like a ghost. The counsellor was an older woman with kind, weary eyes that had seen 1,000 stories like hers. She didn't preach or judge. She just listened as Amelia's story poured out, a torrent of grief, fear, and loneliness. "I know you're scared," the woman said softly when she was done, "but a decision made from fear is one you often regret. This child is a part of the man you loved. He or she is not a burden. They are a continuation of that love." Her words were a gentle hand pulling Amelia back from the edge of a precipice. Amelia walked out of that clinic and into the bright sunlight, tears streaming down her face. She was crying not from sadness but from a profound sense of clarity. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the sky. "I promised myself I would never be like my mother." She placed a hand on her belly. "I will never abandon you. I swear it. It's you and me against the world." A new strength, fierce and protective, surged through her. This was no longer about her. It was about the life growing inside her. That day, she officially took a leave of absence from the university. She sold what little jewellery Liam had given her and found the janitorial job in a downtown office building. The work was gruelling and thankless, but it was a paycheck. It was survival. Her life narrowed to a single focus, protecting the precious legacy Liam had left behind. And so her life fell into a new, monotonous rhythm. Wake up, feel sick, go to the L station, work, come home, collapse. The brief interactions in the subway station were one of the few things that broke the monotony. She continued to buy coffee for the regulars, a small ritual of connection. She found herself looking for the quiet man on crutches each day. His name, she learned from One-Eyed Jack, was Ethan. He rarely spoke, but he would meet her gaze with those intense blue eyes and give her a small, grateful nod. There was a deep sadness in him that resonated with her own. She felt a strange, protective instinct towards him, another broken soul trying to navigate the harshness of the city. One morning, she gave him $5 along with his coffee. He tried to refuse, but she insisted. "Please," she said, "just take it." That afternoon, as she was heading home, she heard shouting from the station entrance. A group of young, thuggish men had cornered Ethan, trying to take the money people had given him. "This is our spot, old man. You pay a tax now," one of them snarled. They shoved him and he stumbled, his crutch clattering to the ground. Something inside Amelia snapped. All the helplessness, the grief, the injustice she had swallowed for months, erupted in a blaze of fury. Without thinking, she charged into the middle of them, swinging her heavy tote bag. "Leave him alone!" she screamed, her voice shaking but loud. "Get away from him right now, or I'm calling the police." The men were so stunned by the sudden appearance of this very pregnant, very angry woman that they froze for a second. "What's it to you, lady?" one of them sneered, taking a step toward her. "Get lost before you get hurt." Before they could do anything else, the sound of an approaching siren made them scatter like rats. Amelia's adrenaline faded, leaving her trembling. She helped Ethan up, her heart pounding. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" she asked, her voice breathless. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of shock, awe, and something else she couldn't quite read. "I'm fine, thanks to you," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." "It was stupid," she countered, brushing herself off. "Come on, let me buy you a proper meal. You can't stay here." He hesitated, then shook his head. I can't. Thank you, but I have to stay. His refusal confused and slightly hurt her. Why would he want to stay where he was a target? She walked away feeling bewildered, her mind racing with questions about the mysterious, silent man she had just defended. After the incident, something shifted between them. The next morning, Ethan was waiting for her, and he held out a single perfect white rose, its petals still dewy. I sold a few things. I wanted to thank you properly, he said, the words coming out in a rush. She was speechless. Every day after that, they would talk for a few minutes. He was guarded about his past, but he asked about her, about the baby, listening with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't since Liam. An unspoken bond grew in those stolen moments, a fragile friendship blossoming in the most unlikely of places. She found herself looking forward to seeing him. The brief conversations, a small island of warmth in her cold, lonely existence. She told herself it was just friendship, just pity, but the flutter in her chest when he smiled told a different story. Then one Monday, he wasn't there. His usual spot was empty. Amelia's heart sank with a familiar, sickening thud. She scanned the station, a frantic hope warring with a rising panic. He was gone. Of course he's gone, she chastised herself, the disappointment a bitter taste in her mouth. He's homeless, Amelia. They move on. What did you expect? But logic couldn't soothe the ache of loss. It felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke, giving her a tiny flicker of connection, only to snatch it away again. The entire day was a grey blur. The joy she had started to feel again was gone, replaced by the old, familiar emptiness. She had let her guard down just a little, and she had been foolish. She vowed to build her walls back up, higher and stronger than ever before. Walking home that evening, dejected and weary, she saw a commotion at a cross street. Several police cars, lights flashing, had blocked off the road. A group of plainclothes and uniformed officers were cuffing the same young men who had attacked Ethan, and directing the operation, speaking into a radio, was a tall, clean-cut man with short blonde hair. He turned, and his eyes met hers across the street. The world stopped. It was him. It was Ethan. The tangled wig was gone, the dirt and grime washed away. He wasn't crippled. He stood tall and confident, but the eyes were the same. Those same intense, shockingly blue eyes. He was a cop. The whole thing, the crutches, the hair, the silence, it had all been a cover, an undercover operation. He saw her staring, a look of panic and regret on his face. He said something to another officer and started walking towards her, and Amelia stood frozen, her mind unable to process the impossible truth. "Amelia, wait," he said, his voice urgent as he reached her. "I am so sorry. I couldn't tell you. I was deep undercover, investigating an extortion ring that was preying on the homeless. My name is really Ethan. Everything you saw was an act, but the way you treated me, that was real. You were the only person who saw a human being." She was reeling, speechless. He had deceived her, and yet the kindness she had shown had been for the man she thought he was. He took a breath. "I know this is a lot, but I can't stop thinking about you. Please let me make it up to you. Let me take you to dinner, as me, for real this time." Hesitantly, she agreed. Over a quiet meal, they laid their broken pieces on the table. He told her about a bitter divorce that had left him disillusioned with people. She told him about Liam. They were two lonely souls who had found each other through a lie, but the connection was undeniably true. They decided to be friends, a safe harbour for each other, but as the months passed and her due date approached, their friendship deepened into something more. He was there for every doctor's appointment, every late-night ice cream craving. He was her rock. When she went into labour suddenly, it was Ethan she called. Complications led to an emergency C-section, and she needed a blood transfusion. Ethan, without a second's hesitation, was the donor. He saved her life. When she woke up, the nurse smiled. "Your husband was so worried. He saved you both." Months later, as Ethan was playing with the baby boy she had named Leo, the child looked up at him, smiled a gummy, toothless smile, and said his first word, "Dada." That night, Ethan got down on one knee. "I know I'm not him," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I love you, and I love this little boy as if he were my own. Marry me, Amelia." Through tears of joy, she said yes. Sometime later, Ethan secretly visited Liam's parents, showing them a photo of their grandson, a perfect blend of his mother and father. Seeing the proof of their son's legacy, their hardened hearts finally broke. They tearfully reconciled with Amelia, becoming the loving grandparents Leo deserved. Amelia had learned that life can take away everything, but it can also give back in the most unexpected ways. Her heart had been shattered, but it had been pieced back together, stronger and bigger than before, creating a new, beautiful family, forged from tragedy, kindness, and a love that defied all odds. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story of resilience. If it touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where a stranger's kindness changed everything?